But I'm joined by Dr. Rob Ripley. Rob, thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Good to see you again, Jeff.
And of course, you guys will all know Rob from as the winner of the 2021 Namib race. I saw a lot of Rob's back, usually off in the distance, coming over a hill.
Do these shorts make my ass look big?
Yeah. So this is great. So today, I'll kind of just get a few things out of the way here, just kind of explain the format and how this is all going to work. So I'm basically going to interview Rob. I have a bunch of questions myself. Rob, I was hammering you with questions during the race. I know about nutrition and training, and I have more questions for you. And I want to talk about, the lead up. I want to talk about the race itself. I want to talk about what you're up to now and what you're going to be up to in the future. But of course, we want to hear from all you guys as well. So whatever questions you have, feel free to just post them in the chat. And I may sort of save them and get to them later, or I might sort of ask them throughout the chat of Rob. But feel free to start posting those questions anytime, and then we'll have lots of time towards the end as well. We're going to go for a good sort of 45 minutes or so, maybe a few minutes longer, depending on how engaged, how many questions we get. But why don't we jump right in? So, Rob, I want you to tell me about kind of the lead up to this race. I know, this was something you were planning on training for not just the season, but multiple seasons. Can you tell me about that? Those 2 years of anticipation?
Well, I initially was going to sign up for the Atacama race in 2019. So I started kind of looking into training for a marathon or an ultra marathon at that time. But then it kind of, the Atacama race got in the way of another race that I was signed up for in Switzerland, which was a duathlon. So I put it off till 2020. And then, as we know, 2020 got canceled. So I put it off to 2021. The Atacama in 2021 got canceled. But I was given the opportunity to change over the Namib race, which I did. But that basically led to 2 years of, well, almost 3 years of thinking about it, and 2 years of training for it. So it was a long time coming, and I think my my results, as surprising as they were both to me and some of the other competitors, I think my results showed that length of time paid off.
Yeah, that focus and I guess sacrifice. I mean, I don't know if there would have really been any other events for you to have done, but I mean, normally, like people like us, we like to race a couple times a year. I mean, in normal times, you would have probably had other events going on. You would have done something else. So like you said, it's almost like that accidental forced focus is maybe what led to some of your success. But I'm curious, were there any, in a normal kind of training program, we have ebbs and flows, we build, we recover, we try to peak perfectly at that right time just for the race. So how did that change your training? Did you have some false starts and then have to sort of say, okay, I need to recover, or were you just training all the way through?
I was pretty much just training all the way through. And I mean, I don't necessarily think of it as training. This is my recreation. I like getting out and doing stuff for long periods of time. I like going for long bike rides. I like going for long cross-country ski days. And I love going out and running in the woods for hours. So that's just what I do. But I think you're right. I think, if we're looking at one race, then we're going to eventually have to come into a training cycle. And I kind of look at it, a training cycle is about 3 months with, 3 weeks on, 1 week kind of recovering and kind of grinding up each month for 3 months, and then, working on a taper. And, but I mean, fortunately, the Racing the Planet folks have been pretty good about keeping us up to date on their problems, and, well, not their problems, but their plans. And so I had plenty of time to kind of change my training from Atacama 2021 to Namib 2021. So it didn't really didn't really change my training. I guess it maybe added another month onto a 3 month training cycle, which
Yeah.
may have been a good thing.
Yeah. And do you work with a coach? I mean, do you follow a fairly strict training program, or do you go a little bit by feel?
I have a coach, Jamie Dispenza, Laughing Dog Try. He's a great guy. I think he's a smart man. And every week he fills out, I'm on the Training Peaks platform. He fills out a week worth of my Training Peaks week. And I typically go with that, although we don't always see eye to eye. And also, I mean, if I wake up and I'm feeling like crud, or if I wake up and I want to go even longer, I will take an audible and just go with it.
Yeah, I mean, the training gives you a bit of structure, right? But it's not like it's an exact science. I mean, you have to listen to your body, and you have to take advantage, like you say. Maybe you have a great weather window. You want to, enjoy a little bit more time out in the trails. I use Training Peaks as well with my coach, Eric Carter. And I think a lot of people ask me or will say, like, do you need a coach? Do you need a training plan? And the answer I don't think is yes at all to finish a race like this. But I don't think it's a coincidence that you train so methodically, working with a coach, and had such a good performance. I think there is something to approaching your training somewhat methodically. Would you agree with that if you really do want podium results?
No, I definitely agree. I mean, I'm an old guy. I've been involved in some sort of athleticism for 50 years now. But even if I didn't have a structure, I would wake up in the morning and say, well, what do I want to do today?
Yeah.
And if you're training for an event, you have to have a certain degree of structure and format to what you're looking at. I mean, you don't have to, but I think if you want good results, I definitely recommend working with a coach. It's certainly easier to work with a coach that you can meet up with and talk with and have coffee with, but there are plenty of coaches you can get on the internet, and even Training Peaks will offer you fairly inexpensive training plans, which will do kind of the same function of spitting your daily workout into your Training Peak program.
Yeah. And then I know Racing the Planet does offer training programs through the website, which again are a great place. I think if you're just starting out, if you just want to finish, that's a great place to start. So I'm curious about your, before we move on from training, being an older athlete, are you very injury prone? Have you, do you need to watch your mileage? Like, would you consider yourself a high mileage athlete, or, how do you approach that?
Have definitely been higher mileage in the last 2 years than I was prior to that. But I think compared to an elite ultra runner, I'm a pretty low mileage runner. I try to do, during my training cycle, I try to, when I was training for the Atacama/Namib race, I was throwing in 2 long days a week back to back. But the other days I was not running long mileage, and I was riding my bike, walking, hiking, doing other things.
Recovery or quality versus just more. Yeah.
And as an older athlete, I think that I think the first thing as an older athlete is you basically just have to keep moving, because if you're old and you stop moving, you're done. But I think you have to train smarter, and you have to put in more recovery, more rest into your schedule. And fortunately, I think my coach understands that, and I understand that.
What about strength training? I'm not sure if I asked you that before when we were together. Is that something you do pretty religiously, or not so much?
I hate strength training. I hate the weight room. I was traumatized as a younger athlete in the weight room. But I think everybody agrees that you need to do some strength training. And so I have come upon a thing called the Vasa trainer, which is a lot of triathletes use it. Some Nordic skiers use it. It's basically a poor man's Pilates reformer. It does, but I can do 10 different exercises. I can exercise almost every muscle group in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can do 3 reps of that in 30 minutes. And I don't particularly like it, but I can do it and check it off and call it strength training. And I do that 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay. Yeah. At least as injury prevention, right? If nothing else. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And
well, I was going to say too, with a race like this, I mean, one particular challenge is carrying a, hopefully not too heavy, but a somewhat heavy pack, which I think some people end up with some back problems and things. And so did you train with your pack much in your training, or did you focus mostly on the running and the fitness?
I trained with a pack most of my long runs, but I didn't train with the full weight. I would train with a smaller running pack, and I would throw in an extra 5 pounds.
Okay.
So 5 pounds plus my water, plus my food,
Yeah.
plus a jacket if I was thinking I needed a jacket. And so I guess I probably went out with my full kit pack. I guess probably 4 or 5 times.
Okay. Almost as much as a test of the gear
Yeah,
itself.
just mostly just to test the gear.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's probably that, people talk about simulation versus stimulation. And in this case, you can stimulate running by doing tempo runs and doing different things. You don't need to simulate the race environment necessarily too much. Once or twice gets you a chance, right, to test out the pack mentally, even just think like, even how's this going to affect my form? But at some point it becomes almost redundant, doesn't it? To do.
I mean, you want to feel like the pack is part of you. I mean, but
yeah.
I don't think running with a full, I mean, I think your pack was a little heavier than mine, and some people's pack was really heavier than mine.
Yeah, mine was still on the light side, and I was maybe a pound heavier than yours, but like you said, some were pretty big. So yeah.
And so, I mean, if I were going to be carrying a 10-kilo pack, I'd have been training with that more. And like I back in my 30s and 40s, I did climbing, and I climbed with 100-pound packs. I mean, it's well, okay, that's probably an exaggeration.
But the difference would be you wouldn't have been running 600 kilometers with that pack on. That's the difference too, right? So that's that fitness side versus the trying to simulate carrying a heavy load. Why don't we talk about gear? Let's move on to the gear. Because again, I think I correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you had 2 years to think about and obsess about every gram. I'm actually curious if I can ask you a question. Would you have had the exact same gear? Was your gear finished and ready to go for the first Atacama race you were hoping to do? Or did you continue to refine that over the next year and a half?
Yeah, I was changing gear right up to the hotel room in Swakopmund. But I had arrived, I guess I bought some of my gear in 2021. I bought a Raid Light Raid Light America had a going out of business sale in 2020 when they switched from, I think they just sold off their American warehouse.
Okay.
And I bought a bunch of Raid Light stuff at that point. And I wound up going with the Raid Light Revolutive pack, which is kind of it's a weird pack, but it's lighter than anything there. And I think I was happy.
Was that correct me if I'm wrong, that was a 25-liter pack? Is that right?
24 liter.
24. And it was a top loading sort of, it looked like it cinched down as it got.
It's top loading with a roll top. Absolutely no padding.
Okay.
It feels like it's made out of Tyvek. I mean,
Yeah.
So you wouldn't want to train a lot with that pack. I think, because its durability, I think it's probably a little questionable.
Yeah. It's a racing pack, maybe not
Yeah.
like a fast packing pack,
Yeah.
but it did look great. I mean, it had the shoulder levelers, I think, and it looked
Yeah.
like it was fairly customizable as far
Yeah.
as fit. Yeah.
It has side adjustments that kind of pull it in to make it a
Mhm.
vest, and it has top adjustments. I wound up using a small front pack with it. Just it felt better to have a little bit of my weight in front.
Sure. Yeah. To counter that. And then did you have that sewn on? Did you get that customized or was that separate?
The front pack it was a raid light, but it was for a different raid light pack.
Okay.
And so I chopped a bunch of off it and just used the minimal 2 attachments, and then kind of secured it with the chest belt.
Okay. Yeah. And red light, for those who don't know, in North America, you don't see many red light packs. And I think it's because, like you said, Rob, there's not a lot of distribution. And I actually didn't even know they shut down their distribution here. So, but you definitely see that more I think more at Racing the Planet events, and specifically in runners from the United Kingdom, which is, I think, where red light's based, right? So,
well, it's French. Definitely.
Oh, they're French. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Marathon de Sable then inspired, I'm sure.
Oh yeah. Definitely. Yeah.
Well, let's come back to gear. I want to stay chronological here and talk about what you might have changed with your gear. But so now let's go into the race. So first of all, what did you expect going into this race, based on your past experience, having volunteered as the medical director for 6 races? I think, is that right?
Correct. I've been at 6 races. So I had a pretty good expectation. I think our race was a little different because it was in the time of COVID. So we had to jump through a lot of hoops to get out to camp. And I was literally freaking out that I was going to, get all the way there and get everything and test positive for COVID and be done. There was a huge amount of anxiety, at least on my part. It's a pretty big commitment to sign up for this and train for it and then go to Namibia. But once we got into camp, it kind of felt like a normal, one of the usual races. It was a little different in that we were allowed to bring a separate tent, which I chose to do, which had its pluses and minuses. And there were fewer competitors. There were only 35 competitors or something like that.
I think 31 starters, I think. And that's, sorry, if I can just jump in there, that's compared to, I believe, 150 max, usually an average of around 110 to 130-ish maybe. So quite a significant decrease. Clearly, I think we still had a fairly deep field, I would argue, at the front. But definitely a different experience than I think what you normally would have. And if I can continue on that, though, I think in the end a better experience, because I think the 31 of us really got to know each other. Whereas when you have 130, it's hard to meet that many people, isn't it? Even over the course of the week.
It's definitely hard. It'd be hard to get to know 120 athletes, but I pretty much. I think I had an idea of everybody's story that was there by the end of the race, and that was special. I mean, it made for an amazing week. And I will say, Sam, Mary, and Rita, Racing the Planet, they did an amazing job of coming through with this race. And the volunteers, there were more volunteers and camp people than racers, and it was just everything ran super smooth, and I was super impressed.
Yeah, I would agree. I remember mentioning to a friend that the race, I suspect, was fairly chaotic behind the scenes. They were changing the course. There was COVID stuff. But you wouldn't know it as a runner. We were just, it felt relaxed. It felt like they had done this a million times before. They have, but just not on that course. Because while Racing the Planet had been to Namibia before, this was a brand new course. Plus the course had to change the week of. So it's a brand new course twice over. So, but we didn't experience any of that stress at all, which is amazing that we were insulated from that, and that they did such a great job of rolling with the punches. So let's get into the race. So we had a couple of days there where we got to know each other, and that first stage, right? So I think, I've only done one stage race before, but the first stage is kind of, you're looking around going like, okay, who am I racing here, right? And usually by the end of the first day, who you're racing. What was your approach going to that first stage? Was it just, I got to hang at the front, or tell me about that? Walk me through what was going through it.
Well, I had no idea who was gonna run and who was not gonna run. I kind of took off at what I thought was a little bit fast for me, kind of probably about a 9.5 minute mile, 5.5 minute kilometer. I'm bad at math. And for a few minutes there, I was kind of running along with Mabasa, and we were kind of chatting, and then Ben kind of came through running an 8-minute mile, and I said, man, no, I'm not going to go with this guy. And I don't remember that. If you remember the first 5 kilometers, there was mud.
It was muddy. Course. Yeah.
And I had a no traction shoe on, so I was kind of looking like Bambi on ice, and trying not to fall on my face.
Yeah.
But kind of after the first checkpoint, Ben was way out there. I don't know, maybe he was out of sight. And typically out of sight was, we probably had half-kilometer sight lines a lot of times. Yeah. So I, but I was like, wow, I'm in second place. This is pretty cool. But I also knew, this was the first 10 kilometers of 200
of the first day. Exactly. Yeah.
And so I just kind of try to stick with my pace, and as it turned out, the pace I had trained for was a 6-minute kilometer, 10 kilometers an hour. And I was actually running a little bit faster than that. And I kind of actually had to rein myself back. But then after the second checkpoint, I would start to see Ben out in the distance, and it's really hard to keep your pace when you see, somebody's kind of out there. And so I probably did pick up my pace a little bit. And I wound up catching Ben by the finish line, and, getting a few seconds on him. But, that was, that was pretty amazing. I had not really expected to win a stage or win the first stage, but it was there. But a lot of the races I've been involved with, the leader, wins the first stage by 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And, essentially the week, the competition for the week is almost done. And so, whereas, Ben was a few seconds behind me, Radomir was a few seconds behind Ben, a few minutes behind Ben, and you were, not that many minutes back there. And so the race was still wide open after the first stage.
Yeah, it was almost a wash. Yeah. And like you said, I remember training for my first stage race years ago and getting some great advice from Jen Sager, who's a local athlete here, tons of experience in these races. And she said, like, you want to pace yourself, you want to think strategically. It's a week of racing. But at the same time, if you get 20 minutes behind the leaders on the first day, you're not going to really make that up. Like, it gets really hard. That 20 minutes adds up every day. So if your goal is to podium, like, you kind of got to hang with the leaders, or at least, like you said, keep it within 5-10 minutes, 20-25 minutes. Those gaps start to get pretty big. Unless somebody ends up having a really bad day. But what I've noticed with these races is that typically people don't have bad days. It's like consistency wins the day, doesn't it? Like, it's being consistent, never having a bad day. And so it's a matter of who's more consistent, almost like who can just.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in a couple of races where people blew up on the long day. Particularly, the leaders in the race are never really out in the heat until the long day. And so
that's exactly it.
I mean, you never know exactly how the heat's going to take you on until the long day. Fortunately, I think the long day on our race, on the Namib race, after we crested that, the hill, whatever the ridge, checkpoint 2, we had a pretty good wind off the coast that was coming in and cooling us. So we weren't, things didn't get too hot on the long day.
Yeah, there was that sort of that mist and a bit of breeze coming off, and we were getting closer to the ocean again. So we were getting a bit more of that again. And so stage 2, I think you'd probably agree, Radmir all of a sudden became a known quantity, right? So he really killed that stage. And I'm sure you and Ben were both then thinking like, okay, it's a race of 3 now.
Well, it was a little weird. I mean, he was running so strong, and I mean, you guys left me kind of going down the ridge. We kind of ran out of that little caldera, and there was some, I would call it technical. You would probably just call it descending. But kind of everybody kind of left me there, and I kind of gradually, came back through, and that. But I never saw Radmir again that day, and but then it turned out that he had been given a a technical penalty for his gear, which is I mean, legitimately, I think he either misread or misjudged the gear list, and so so I was actually still in the lead after the second day, but I was like looking at Radmir, and he's young and he's strong and he can run. So
and to clarify, so that was there are requirements for, of course, what gear to bring, but also the qualitative nature of it. Your sleeping bag needs to be a certain rating, for example, and if it's not, then the race may you're not going to not let you run, but they might give you a time penalty. And the idea is to try to balance out the fact that maybe your gear is lighter than it should be, or so it is really important to get that stuff right, because it does otherwise give an unfair advantage. And so that's what happened in this case. But then the third stage, though, I think it, again, we talked about that idea of trying to be consistent, and it seemed like the heat got to Radmir then on the third day, maybe because he did push so hard on the second day.
I think he was paying a little bit for the second day, and the third day was a brutal day.
Third day was hot. It was really hot. Yeah. So that's where then my race then became with Radmir, where I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to make up that. I can't remember how you guys were quite a fair ways ahead of me cumulatively at that point. But my race then became with Radmir, which was fun for me. So I think for him, I was able to push him probably, I'm sure.
I think you gave him a good run for his money, but
yeah. So at that point, I mean, we're a few days in, was there anything that was surprising you? Was there anything that you didn't expect, despite all your years of racing experience in triathlons and things, shorter races, and your years of volunteering? At that point, was there anything that you were like, oh, shoot, I wish I had made this other decision differently, gear wise, pacing wise, anything?
I think, the third day, I actually started to kind of feel a little bit better. And I think, I mean, you have to be able to run with fatigue, particularly if you're going to, if you're going to get top 10 in one of these races, you're trying to run it, and your legs are going to be tired. And the second day, my legs really felt tired. But the third day, they probably felt just as tired, maybe even more tired. But then it was kind of surprising. I just said, oh, well, I can run with my legs like this. I can do this. And that was a new experience to me.
Yeah.
And after that, the days, they just got better. I really had a great time out there with you guys and with the desert. It was just almost a transcendent experience. As far as gear goes, I was happy with my shoes. I was happy with my socks.
What shoes were you wearing? Somebody actually did ask me that as well. Were they road shoes that you were wearing?
I was wearing road shoes. I was wearing the Hoka Carbon X, which nobody would ever recommend you doing a a multi-stage desert race in them.
Yeah.
And I would say if you're going to do it, you want to train with these shoes and be aware of their limitations. But
Does that have a carbon plate in it? So it's made for speed and response, right? Not mileage, not distance.
Yeah, it's definitely not made for distance. But my finding, and this is not scientific, but my finding is with the carbon shoes, it's not like I'm running that much faster, but I feel better the next day. And that's just my experience. If I run 20 miles, on the dirt or the road with the carbon shoes, I feel better the next day than if I just run with a regular pair of Hokas.
Interesting. I'm going to be experimenting myself with carbon shoes this year. Salomon's introducing some carbon stuff into their line, and so it's brand new technology, and it's
I definitely wouldn't try the Nike Vapors or anything like that, but
yeah, they're a little too light.
I'm trying to talk the Hoka people into making the Speed Goat with a carbon plate, but I haven't had any response yet.
So I want to talk about the long stage. Am I right in remembering that you had never run an ultra before? You've done Ironmans, which means you're used to mentally pushing yourself for 16 hours, whatever that ends up being. But you had never run, or am I wrong in that? Have you done?
I've never done an Ironman.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I first off, I've only done one triathlon in my whole life, and I just got drowned. So I'm
sorry. It was duathlons. Yes.
The longest race I've ever done was the Powerman duathlon in Zofingen, Switzerland, and that was an 8-hour race. Should have been a 7-hour race, but I had some issues. But that would be the longest race I was ever in, and the longest distance that I'd ever run before Namib was a 36-mile training run. The last time I did a competitive marathon before I started training for, the last time I did a marathon before I started training for Atacama would have been the Boston in 1989.
Okay. So you're used to, you'd been on feet for, like you said, 8 hours or on bike on feet. So nutritionally, there probably wasn't any surprise, but when you hit that point of 37 miles, you'd never run that far. What was happening in your head? And did you experience anything interesting new, or did you find you were able to just kind of push through that day without problem?
That was a great day. And partly, because there was a little bit of camaraderie. I mean, you were leading for a while, I was leading for a while, Ben was leading for a while, and we were running in a pack for a while. Not that we were having much conversation, but it felt good to have company out there. And then I think it was at the 5th checkpoint. I came into the checkpoint a little bit behind you guys. And Radmir was a ways back from us. So it was just you, me, and Ben. And somehow I came out of the checkpoint, and you guys were still there. And I said, wow. And so I said, well, let's see what I can do. And so I picked up the pace for a mile or two, and I was pleasantly surprised that I asked for a little bit extra for my legs, and they had it. It wasn't like I was, blowing things away. I mean, I upped the pace from a 10-minute mile to a 9-minute mile for about a mile, and then 9.5-minute miles. And but kind of after a week of running and being into the last 20 kilometers, I was pretty jazzed. There was definitely some endorphins kicking in, and I really wasn't feeling pain. I mean, I was,
Yeah.
I was definitely tired, but I was excited and it was good.
Yeah, I felt the same way. Those last 20K were a lot of fun. I think I could smell the barn and I knew,
Yeah.
man,
Yeah.
I think I just caught Ben and I was running
Hmm.
scared a little bit and
Yeah.
the endorphins started flowing. And like you said, sometimes it just clicks and
Yeah.
you just are really enjoying in the moment, like the feeling of fluid
Hmm.
movements and pushing yourself. I would say, having watched you during the week, that your performance was a case of perfect planning, but also perfect execution. And I think that's the piece that, that in
Well, thank
my,
you.
well, when I see people have great performances, I think it's an easy mistake to think that wow, they just killed it, like they just went out and worked hard on the day, or they got lucky, and that's not the case. Like it's all of the work you did without mistakes, without getting injured, good planning, good gear, and good nutrition, and then more importantly, staying on top of your nutrition, not falling back, not
Hmm.
going out too hard, like it just executing the plan, planning the work and working the plan. Um, One thing and I should say that means you have to have a good plan to begin with, but then you also
Yeah.
have to be disciplined, right? And how you
Hmm.
execute. You can't, like you say, it's not going that much faster. It's 10%
Hmm.
faster. It makes all the
Hmm.
difference. Let's talk about nutrition. That's one thing we didn't talk about. So
Hmm.
you had a different strategy than I did.
Yeah.
I tend to stay away from powders because they're
Hmm.
complicated. I'm rethinking that strategy now after seeing both you and
Yeah.
Ben relied
Hmm.
on powders during the run. So can you tell me
Hmm.
about both your nutrition, both in terms of camp food and run food?
Okay. So, uh, 10 years ago, as a bike racer, um, wannabe bike racer, I was introduced to Scratch Labs Nutrition, um, Alan Lim's uh, company. Alan Lim is a PhD sports physiologist who worked with the Garmin team back 20 years ago. Or anyway, I think he makes a good product. I am not a sponsored athlete, so I have no money in the game here. But I've tried the Hammer products. I've tried Tailwind. I've tried pretty much everything since ERG back in the 70s.
Yeah,
And Scratch, I can drink it all day,
yeah,
and that's pretty much what it takes. You have to have something you can drink all day, and I've as a on the medical team, I've given it to athletes medically um, when they haven't been able to keep anything else down, and they've been able to keep it down,
yeah.
and they've been able to finish the race. That's a whole N of two. I mean, so this isn't a scientific project, but it's my experience that it's tolerable, and so but I wouldn't. I mean, everything that I had as far as nutrition, I had used extensively in training, and so I used the rehydration drink.
Okay,
There was a product that Scratch makes called Super Fuel,
okay.
which adds some carbs, slow digesting carbs. And I put some of that in my rehydration drink. I didn't mix it up. They recommend like 7 scoops in a bottle. I can do that, but it's
I can just jump
heavy.
in, just
Yeah.
ask a clarifying question. So, okay, so you
Sure.
had bags of powder, and one of them would have
Yeah.
been mostly electrolytes. That's the rehydration.
Hmm.
And then the other one would have been like maltodextrin or some kind of carbohydrate powder. And you were sort
Yeah.
of using a combination. So you were getting your electrolytes and your fuel, your carbs from
Hmm.
that powder mix. You would
Right.
then put those, I saw you'd go up to the aid station and you kind of put it in your bottle, get some water, and you would
Hmm.
basically drink your electrolytes and your carbs throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had it mixed up. So, I mean, I'd start each day with 4 bags,
Okay.
and or in the long day, 7 bags or 8 bags.
So I think like you said, like, this is such a personal thing, right? Nutrition, and
Hmm.
it's everybody's GI system, everybody's stomach reacts differently, but also can
Yep.
react differently on different days in different environments, hot
Yeah.
versus cold, right?
Hmm.
Long days versus short days, pace can affect your GI.
Hmm.
What So it sounds like you didn't have any problems with that. I mean, that was just you can drink that stuff all day.
Yeah.
What about though balancing out how much you drink versus then how much you're taking in with carbs? Were you keeping one bottle with just water and one with carbs? How were you
I,
balancing water
I just,
versus?
I had one bottle of water and then one
Okay.
bottle of powder or, drink.
Okay.
And typically, I would, just drink that one bottle a stage.
Okay.
I think on the third day, coming up the canyon when it started to get really hot, and we were, in that long 10-kilometer uphill grind, I was drinking some of my water too.
Okay.
But for the most part, I was drinking, 600 or 700 cc's of water per.
Hmm.
But I mean, that's also totally personal. I mean,
Yeah.
I have a pretty good idea of what my water loss is per hour in the heat, and it's probably slightly more than 700 cc's, but it's not that much more.
Yep. So then your carb intake was staying fairly regular because you said, sorry to clarify, were you drinking a bag per stage or per checkpoint, like per 10K
Oh,
leg?
sorry, per leg,
Yeah.
per
So
checkpoint.
you sort of try to drink that each
Yeah,
hour, and then you had then water that you could more
yeah,
liberally drink separately to make
hmm
sure you're staying hydrated. Yeah.
yeah.
And what about your caloric intake in total? So you had your run food. I think you had said you're aiming for around 200 calories an hour, if I remember correctly. Is that give or
So,
take 50?
yeah, yeah, about
Yeah.
200 calories an hour during the day.
And then what
Um,
about your nutrition as a whole? So Racing the Planet requires minimum 14,000 calories, and
yeah,
most people take more than that. I took
yeah.
16,000. What was your strategy for overall
Uh,
nutritional intake on the week?
my calorie count was 20,000 for the week, um, and I'm sorry, I had it all written down, and I should have that here, but I don't. But um, it was roughly 1,000 calories a day in powder.
Okay.
I had because I'd had roughly 200 calories per checkpoint,
Yeah.
and then I had a 200 calorie recovery shake. So that'd be 1,000 calories,
Mhm.
and then I had roughly almost you know almost 1,000 calorie breakfast and 1,000 calorie dinner. um, so I mean I was still starving. I mean,
Yeah.
just so we're clear here.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You didn't have a lunch for after the run, hey? So when you finished, you kind of had to try
uh,
to wait, kill some time, but then at the same time,
yeah, I had a couple picky bars, so like a energy bar. I usually had one or two of those after the race,
yeah.
but then I would mix up half of my 1,000 calorie dinner
Okay.
within an hour and eat that, and then have the other half of my 1,000 calorie dinner, you know, at an early dinner time.
So you essentially had treated it as two meals because 1,000 calories
Yeah,
is a lot. That's on the big end.
yeah.
That's the what's the brand? Is it Expedition
It is Expedition Foods.
Foods?
Once again, I'm not a sponsored athlete, but I've been eating this stuff on Racing the Planet races
Yeah.
for years because the volunteers, we don't have like a mess tent with pizza. We're eating we're eating freeze
Mhm.
dried food too.
Yeah. You do
Um,
have that beer keg though,
yeah,
right on tap. And yeah.
well, that's the Namibian drivers now.
Yeah. Yeah.
The
So
regular the regular volunteers don't have access to that.
so you'd already tried and tested, like you said. This was none of this
Yeah,
was new for you. So you knew you
and
liked these meals and they were big, and so you did essentially have a lunch and a dinner, 500 and 500, which
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
But
And
that's a big breakfast too. So you're
yeah,
starting the day with a nice foundation.
I probably got more like 600 calorie breakfast in.
Okay.
But when I was in training, if I, like I said, I had kind of these weekends where I would do, not necessarily weekend, but I would do back to back long runs,
Yeah.
and I would literally, eat camp food. I mean, I would start out with a freeze-dried oatmeal. I would do my powders, my recovery drinks, and then I'd have expedition food dinner. And I did that, a couple weekends, a month, during my training. Wow. And so, I mean, I knew that my stomach could do it. And I, as on the medical team, most of the people that drop these races drop them because of GI issues. At least that's been my experience. I mean, obviously feet are a big deal, dehydration is a big deal, but I've seen more athletes drop because they can't eat.
Yeah, I feel like feet are something you can learn to control. You can stay on top of, but yeah, GI. I mean, and it's a downward spiral once you're not eating, and then and it just creates problems. So again, Radmir had some problems eating, I know, for a couple of days there. I think he got nothing in for a whole day. So you approach your nutrition as methodically as your training and your execution. And I think there's some great tips there. If anybody wants to learn more, Rob, you were blogging for months leading up to the race and then during the race as well. There's a cyber tent people can use, and you were blogging. I would definitely recommend Rob's blog. Go to racingtheplanet.com. I believe you then go to the Namib race and look at blogs, and you can see Rob's past blog posts. And I think you just started blogging again now in lead up to Atacama.
Yep, I started the Atacama blog.
But you're a great writer. Plus, you obviously have like just tons of insight into what works. So I think I highly recommend everybody checking that out to learn more. Rob, what about? So you didn't have any GI distress. That was a question here. I think I can speak for you to say that, right? I don't remember you saying that you did. Yeah. Did you have any foot problems? I don't remember you having any problems with your feet at all either.
I lost a toenail.
Okay.
I probably. Going into the long day, I probably should have pre-taped a couple of toes, but I just I'd had pretty good luck so far. But again, I'd never run that far before.
Yeah.
And my theory about feet is that you want to stress them out a little bit and then let them heal, and so that you have scar. You have selective scar tissue where you need it. Yeah. And apparently I didn't have enough scar tissue, but
was there anything like, I think you even mentioned this in your interview in the video, like you've seen thousands of blisters, you've seen every foot problem there is. So was there anything you did based on that experience, that learned experience, or anything you would recommend people do? Like you said, taping, lubing, what are the basics?
I pretty went natural. I didn't lube, I didn't tape. Like I said, I probably, the fourth day, I kind of felt a little bit, and I should have probably pre-taped. Pre-tape being, you can take the paper tape that you have and longitudinally over the top of the toe, and then a piece around the toe. And that'll kind of give you some protection for that toe if you're starting to get a hot spot there.
Or on the heel, maybe anywhere you might get hot spots. Right?
Yeah, kind of anywhere you can take, just a little length of paper tape and put it on there. Or, some people will go so far as using KT tape or heavier athletic tape. But you have to, I mean, if you're going to do this, you need to know, you have room in your shoe, you have room in your sock, and you have to know how it's going to work, because I've seen athletes who pre-tape their feet with duct tape and did well. And I've also seen athletes who pre-taped their feet with duct tape and then got blisters underneath the duct tape and then pulled the duct tape off and basically, took all the skin off their foot. And obviously once you're at that situation, there's not a whole lot the medical team can do.
Yeah. What about taping? Do you get chafing on your back, on your lower back? Did you do anything for that in advance?
I didn't. When I was running with the my OM pack, I was getting some chafing down below, but the Raylight pack didn't really chafe. So I was pretty fortunate with that.
And you mentioned having room in your feet. I've over the years heard, there's the camp that like to go a half size up on their shoes to let the feet swell. And personally, I don't. I find too much room gives me blisters because I end up sliding around. What's your thought on sizing of shoes?
I went up a half size,
Okay.
and it it turned out to be, a little bit scary for me, because when I was kind of in my, my 3-month, 4-month heavy training phase, the half size felt pretty good. But then I did a 3-week taper and my feet shrank back down to a 10 and a
Right.
half. And so I put my shoes on, in Swakopmund, and I'm like, holy, oh no. And so it's definitely, it's definitely a risky thing, I think I got away with it. I ran with the Inji toe socks,
Yep.
which, take up a little bit more room in the toe box of your shoe.
Yeah.
And so, so I didn't feel like I was, slopping around. And I've seen, some people recommend, oh, you need to go up an entire shoe size or 2 shoe sizes. And that's just crazy talk as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned.
that seems crazy to me too. Yeah. Yeah. Because again, you start to get your heels coming out, you're slipping, and that's friction causes blisters for sure at the end of the day. So this is just, again, one of those things, it's experience, isn't it? Like this is all trial and error. Yeah. Let's talk about recovery. So, I think, we talked about the long stage. The last stage was sort of more just a fun run. And then the body starts to go into like, oh, we're done here. Okay. I'm going to swell up. I'm going to, all the problems, what was your recovery like in the days and then the weeks? How long did it take you to get moving again? Did you have a strategy for that?
Oh, Nancy and I went on a safari for we went to a safari camp for 4 days after the race, and they wouldn't let us go out of the camp without somebody with a rifle. So we didn't do any running for, basically until I got home to the States, almost a week after the race.
Bit of active walking, though, I'd imagine.
Did some walking, tried to do stretching. But by the time I got back, I was ready to go run again. I wasn't really training for anything, but like I said, this is my recreation. I enjoy what I do, and I enjoy getting out in the woods.
Yeah.
But I think recovery, because of the way the stage race is, every day, your job number one when you finish your stage is that you need to get recovered to do your best for the next stage. Yeah. If you want to go for the podium, that's where the race is going to be won, is who can recover better for the next day.
Yeah, 100%. And so, like you said, you kind of come out of this almost recovered. Yes, we had just on the long stage, but it's not like a cumulative wear and tear. If it was, you would never make it through the week. It's active recovery, and you do feel stronger. I've always felt with, even doing like continuous multi-day races, the second day is always the hardest. That second sunrise, but the third, usually you start to get in a rhythm where you're like, okay, this is my life for a while, and your body starts to adapt. So if you're doing it right, you're pacing it right, you're recovering, you are getting stronger throughout the week. But what about the mental aspects? Because that is one thing that, you were hyper focused on this race for 2 years. Did you feel you needed a bit of a break just mentally?
Definitely. It was a big weight off my chest to finish it, and finish it well. Just because I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it for 3 years. I've been actively training for it for 2 years. I've been obsessing about it. And then, there was so much anxiety about getting there healthy, getting there with a negative COVID test, that a lot of anxiety was lifted just getting there. But then, finishing it, it was like finally, got this off my plate. I've got this off my head. And so that was big. But like I said, this is what I do for fun. And so I sat around and Nancy and I talked, and I, had my internal dialogue, and here I am, signed up for the next race.
Well, that's a good segue. So, there's a rule of thumb that you should never sign up for your second ultra for at least 24 hours after your first. So how long did it take you to decide, and what are you doing next? What are your plans for the coming season?
So, we finished Namib first week of November, and I waited until the first week of January to sign up for the Atacama race. So I'm going to try to do the Atacama race. I've been obsessing about it, and if you ever get a chance, the Atacama Desert is a special place. I mean, the Namib Desert, amazing. And as your footage, this last, 8 episodes of your footage has been amazing. It's just, it's been beautiful. But the Atacama is also a very special place to me, and I've been obsessing about running this race since 2019. So I am going to do it.
Okay, and that's in September.
That's in September. And then Nancy and I have signed up for the medical team for the Georgia race in June. So
I will see you there, because I'll be running that. So
all right.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having you on my team instead of as competition. No, it would have been great to run with you again, but I really want to do Atacama. That's on my list. I was going to do that if I didn't get into the UTMB lottery this year. And that UTMB has been on my list for years. So maybe next year I'll do Atacama, because I've heard that sentiment expressed by everybody who's run it. They all said Namibia is beautiful, but wait till you see Atacama. And so I think it's to me, it feels like it would be the perfect, maybe the one to save for last. I don't know. Yeah.
I've also signed up for an actual ultra. I've signed up for the Siskiyou 100K in Southern Oregon, which is also, I've hiked there. I've never run there, but it's beautiful course. But it'll be a 100-kilometer race, which will be the furthest I've ever run before.
Awesome. And when is that? When is that one?
That is July 9th. So we will see how that goes. It's totally different format, but I think I can get 3 months of training in for that, do a little bit of a taper, and then a couple months of training in for Atacama.
So kind of, we talked through your planning, your strategy, all this stuff, and what would you do differently, if anything? It sounds like you executed perfectly, you planned perfectly. Or actually, let me ask you a different question. Let me ask you that differently. What are you going to do differently now for Atacama? Are you going to change anything as far as your gear, your nutrition, your training?
Wow. I think I'm going to go with the same pack. Okay. I may need a slightly warmer sleeping bag for Atacama.
Okay.
Sorry,
if I can clarify. So warmer than the minimum required 0 degree Celsius bag.
Yeah. Atacama starts out at 10,000 feet, 3,000 meters, and it's freaking cold up there.
Yeah. If I can throw in a recommendation, unsolicited recommendation, just in my own research on fast packing gear, going with a warmer pad might be the best way, because you actually lose a lot of heat through the ground. And so I've seen the argument that you're actually better with a lighter bag, but a warmer pad, or 2 pads even. So that might be something to consider.
Yeah, well, I'll have to look into that. So I'm gonna do some more sleeping bag research. And I'm also there's in 2020 or 2019, there were only 2 carbon plate shoes on the market, the Carbon X and the Nike Vapor. Now there's probably going to be 20 or 30 carbon plate shoes on the market. And so I'm going to try some other brands out, and and play around. But it's a long process, because I think you've probably got to run through that shoe. You probably have to run 200 or 300 miles on a shoe to get an idea if if it's going to work for you.
With carbon shoes, especially at my I've never run in a carbon plated shoe, but my understanding is that they need to be broken in as well. So the shoe actually changes over time, right?
A little bit. I like them. I like my carbon fresh.
Responsive. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend breaking them in too much.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Well, I mean, that's amazing, Rob. Thank you so much for joining today. Was there anything that I didn't ask you that any advice you'd give for people who might be considering a multi-day race like this with Racing the Planet?
Oh, well, I mean, you and I are obviously pretty motivated and talking about, finishing in the top 10 or the podium. And
yeah.
God, I would say, first of all, some of the most amazing athletes that were out there in Namib and on the other races that I've seen are not in the top 10. They're in the middle of the pack or the end of the pack, and they're out there all day, and they're moving, and it's just amazing to watch. And that's what drew me to these races, is just the human experience and watching these people out there. And so I would just say, anybody could do these races. I mean, and I would encourage everybody to do these races. It's just an amazing experience. And I would say that that you should put some thought into it and put some time into it, because it's a big investment of time, money, travel. And so, you want to do the minimum amount of training. You want to spend a few hours on your feet, a couple times a week, moving, on trails, on unstable surfaces. I mean, you want to put in the work, but you could do this. And so I would encourage anybody who sees this to look at these races and think about it, because I think they're an amazing experience.
Yeah, well said. And Rob, I think, I speak for everybody, I'm sure, who says they were, like, I was super inspired by your story, and not just because you performed so well, but I mean, your entire story of, your massive comeback, right? From your battle with health problems, but also, I mean, say it like it is, at your age. Like I said that in my film, I'm looking at you like, I would love to be doing what you're doing at your level of performance in 20 years. I mean, that would be incredible. So super motivating for me as well. So thanks so much for joining. Right. Again, everybody, go check out Rob's blog and follow along, because he's going to be running out of Atacama, and I'm sure doing hopefully well there. You've set the bar high, and people are going to be gunning for you now. So I can't wait to follow along with that one. So thank you very much, Rob. And I look forward to seeing you in Georgia.
Yeah, we'll look forward to it.
Okay. Talk soon. Right. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. All right.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.